Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar on your China roadmap. This is the last webinar for 2020. We've got a brand new webinar series geared up starting from January. But the whole point of today's webinar is so that you can design your own China roadmap, your own action plan to enter the Chinese market or to operate in the Chinese market in order to be able to grow a performing business. So the objective of today's session is to put you guys on this roadmap. I have sent out a handbook, which I hope you printed out, where you can start taking notes and making checklists of your own in terms of what you would need to do as an action plan for 2021. To begin today's session, I always like to start off with this slide, which is basically for me to get an understanding of who's in the audience and to get a little bit familiar with the newcomers to our webinar series. So I categorize people in China in three categories. The first are the newbies to China. The newbies are those of you that are in the stage where you found an opportunity or you're looking for an opportunity in China, and you're basically at a stage of fishing for information. You're trying to get an education on how to protect your business, on what is the right model of entry, what are the stages of the development in China. If you are a newbie, please do type into the chat box newbie. It is always a lot of fun when people are interacting and posting as well. If you are a startup in China, for me, the definition would be that you've been established directly or indirectly for a period of about 1 to 3 years. What I mean by directly or indirectly means just very simply, you've either transacted with China directly for about 1 to 3 years, or you've actually implemented an entity in China and you've been operating locally for about a period of 1 to 3 years. Usually while the startups work is that they're so focused on their core activities, predominantly sales or merchandising or production, that they focus less and less on the administrative aspects surrounding their assets, surrounding what needs to be protected within the organization. So if you are a startup, please do type in startup. And experienced China hands would be someone like myself who's been in China for 17 years. Or even, I categorize it as people that are over 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And, everyone is always looking for fresh ideas and tips on how to improve their structures and on how to improve just generally their business in China. And I'm one of those. I always join webinars to further my own education in regards to China, particularly when there are new regulations that pop out, which it happens regularly. So if you are an experienced China hand, please do type that in as well. So Allison's typed in. I've spoken with Allison previously. She's a newbie. Welcome, Allison. For those of you that haven't typed in, I don't want to pick out names or anything like that, but do interact with me, because how this webinar works is that I teach, I educate and today specifically on designing your own China roadmap and the bullet points that you need to consider. So the best way to get value out of today's presentation is if you do interact with me, you list comments or you ask questions. You can do that into the questions section of the control panel. I will be staying on until all questions and comments have been answered. And this just helps you to have a good 60 minutes of a valuable spend of your time, all right? From a technical point of view, we are using the GoToWebinar platform. I don't own GoToWebinar. I'm not in control of GoToWebinar. So if you do run into technical difficulties, I know that's very frustrating. I understand that. We've all run into those issues. I cannot help you though if I'm speaking and presenting, and I don't have any other staff members who are around who can help you with that either. Just know if you do run into any sound difficulties or bandwidth stability, I am recording today's session. It will be up on our YouTube channel, so you will get a link to it and you will then be able to review it as well. All right. If I run into any technical difficulties, it usually takes about 30 seconds to 1 minute for me to reboot the system. And so of course, if you have to log off because of time, completely understand, but just know I will be coming back on to finish the recording and to finish today's presentation. So just an intro onto who am I. My name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I have been in the corporate services and compliance sector for the last 17 years in China, specifically based out of Shanghai. I am now one of the leading experts on inbound investment into the Chinese market for a variety of industries and sectors. What we do, because I am the creator of the China Roadmap methodology, is we help to put clients and companies on a journey. And a lot of this depends on their motivation to learn and to educate themselves. But the idea is to get as much knowledge base as possible so that you have the right pre-investment, at the pre-investment stage, the right advisory to implement a structure and to then be able to have a routine in place that helps you to focus on the growth of your organization and help you to make quick and fast decisions in a market that is very quick and very fast. So we're going to put you on that journey today, which is the China Roadmap methodology. So what is the Roadmap methodology? Well, basically on the left-hand column, you have the 3 milestones. The 3 milestones are opportunity, implementation, and growth. When you're looking at the first milestone, which is opportunity, or let me go back a step. With these 3 milestones, my belief is that you need to achieve 9 different superpowers that you continuously and consistently maintain throughout your China journey in order to be able to make decisions quick, fast, and to focus then on the growth of your organization. 2020 is a perfect example of that, where without a knowledge base, without an understanding of the trends that were occurring in China, it was impossible to be able to pivot one's organization in China if you didn't have those basic superpowers in hand. So in a time of crisis, it's where these superpowers become critical in being able to make decisions and pivot your organization in various directions. So we're going to get you onto that roadmap and help you to achieve those superpowers. So milestone 1 is about opportunity. How do you evaluate that opportunity? Well, you've got to educate yourselves on China and then go into the nitty-gritty details of education. You've got to have research at your fingertips, and you've got to put pen to paper and write a strategy and a budget, which may all make sense to you. But the whole point of today is for me to tell you what types of education exist, what research there is, and how to put pen to paper. I mean, I still have people that are expanding into China that are in their 40s and 50s that have never written a business plan because they didn't do it 50 years ago when they were setting up, or 30 years ago when they were setting up their original businesses, and they need help with all of these things. So I'm going to be giving you those tools to be able to evaluate whether there is actually an opportunity in the Chinese market or not. The second milestone, which I misspelled, implementation, is implementing your strategy, okay? And when I say implementing, because some people get confused by this, it does not necessarily mean implementing a structure on the ground. It's simply implementing a structure to do business in China, whether that's direct from your head office or whether that's actually implementing something on the ground. To achieve that implementation stage, you have to have an ecosystem. You have to evaluate all of your assets and protect them by developing system processes and operational guidelines. All right. Once you have that background and that knowledge level and that network of individuals, you can then move on to the third milestone, which is growth. And growth for me truly is a lot about the numbers within your organization and analyzing those numbers. So looking at your financial management reports specific to your China business, understanding everything from VAT to customs duty, understanding all of the tax implications, and then ultimately being able to analyze those together with additional items to make decisions. Will you retract from the market? Will you move forward in the market? Will you move sideways, upways, downways? You need to be able to make decisions. But if your focus is so much on the administrative side and the protecting side, because you haven't done that from the beginning, you can't make decisions quickly. Or if the fact that you didn't do any form of protection from the start means that you cannot move forward in a direction that you want to, because there's an obstacle in the way, then you have to backtrack again to fix those items in the implementation stage. Ultimately, you want to be able to cross all the T's and dot the I's so that you have the ability to focus on what is critical in your business and to make decisions swiftly, and be able to pivot your business swiftly so that you still have traction in the Chinese market. You don't want to get left behind, all right? So I want to highlight here, and I want to start off with war stories, because usually this is what attracts people to this webinar series. So I'm going to start off with what are the problems if you don't follow the roadmap, okay? And I've got, I think, 3 or 4 examples that I want to highlight to you today. So the first example is in relation to research, and research is ultimately creating new knowledge. So the case study that I'm going to use is of an Austrian company that approached me in about 2005, 2006. They met with me in my office and they basically said, we are here, they're a food and beverage company, we are here to participate and attend the Cial trade show, which is one of the largest food trade shows in Shanghai. And we already have a 40-foot container that's on the way to China, because we're quite sure, considering what we know, that we're going to get orders placed and that people will want our product straight away. So I just simply started to raise questions, thinking that they knew everything. Meaning, I said, well, who's your consignee of the products? They didn't have a consignee, they didn't have a distributor. I then asked, who is going to get the labels and go handle the quarantine inspections in relation to the products once they've landed in Shanghai? They had no idea about the regulations associated with the labeling, with the additional licenses that you need to be able to sell food and beverage products into the Chinese market, not to mention the quarantine inspections and testing inspections that have to occur as well. And I said, so you have a booth, right, at this Cial show? Didn't have a booth. They were simply attending with a rollaway suitcase that had samples inside that they were going to kind of just, I don't quite know how they were planning on distributing that, but that was sort of their idea. Ultimately, what I want to highlight is these guys thought they knew everything. They thought they had done their research. And it's to scare you a little bit for you to realize that in every industry and sector, there is specific information you need to know about either sourcing in China, producing in China, or selling into the Chinese market, or simply even providing a service locally. Research and knowledge is critical. You cannot go into the Chinese market with that knowledge. And I absolutely agree if anyone says, well, I don't know what I should know. And what should I know, right? You go into China and you make the assumption like these guys did. They made a lot of assumptions without really talking with people directly, talking with people specifically in their industry about importing products and how it works. So when I talk about superpower 1 and 2, which is education and research, do not undervalue that. It is critical for entering the Chinese market. The next is basically one of the action plans and superpowers that I will be getting you guys to do in today's workshop is evaluating your assets. What are your assets and what value would you place on them? And assets means everything from IP to patents, copyrights. Sorry, I've got something stuck in my throat. All the way down to, do you have specific operational guidelines? Do you have specific system processes? How do you vet companies? What are your assets? What is critical to the success of your business. This case study is in relation to a German company that we had, again, in early 2005, 2006. Now, this company entered China very early. As you can tell by the picture, they are a lock company. And they started off in China. By now, it would have been 30 to 40 years ago via an exclusivity agreement with a distributor. And they had an excellent relationship with this distributor. Absolutely no issues whatsoever. And in those days, you've got to imagine, to do anything in China, you actually had to work through a distributor. You could not go it alone. So their assumption was that that was never going to change. Now, in order to be able to sell their products into the Chinese market, they wanted to register their brand. And instead of, again, talking to people, lawyers, IP specialists, whatever it might be, they spoke to their distributor directly about it. And their conclusion was that the distributor should register the brand name so that he had the ability to sell it, without realizing that actually Germany could register the trademark and license the brand to the distributor. So the distributor registered it. And lo and behold, China opened up. Lo and behold, 15, 20 years later, they realized that they could take the distributor out of the supply chain and go direct. Okay? They understood the market, they had gained knowledge, they knew how everything was working. But obviously, what happened? The distributor lost face by the fact that they were terminating the agreement, but he had leverage. He said, wait a minute, guys, I own your brand. So you can't get rid of me. Either you pay me out or you have to license from me, right? So you've got to keep control of your most important asset. And now, being that China is relatively open in most industries and sectors, you have the ability to protect your assets. The other day, I had a UK client approach me. They want to register their trademarks in China. And she said, well, I said, so who's going to own it? Oh, the Chinese company will. I said, well, if you're looking to set up repatriation strategies, why not have the UK own it and have a repatriation strategy, have a trademark licensing agreement to get money out of China? Because these are all strategies and techniques you need to keep in mind, right? For the long term, as soon as you start becoming profitable, which means you want your overseas structures to own those trademarks. You want to be able to evaluate what makes sense for your business. Now, if you're in the R&D sector and you want to get the special tax rates applicable to high-tech enterprises, then your IP has to be owned by a Chinese entity. All right, so in that scenario, you've got to have it owned by a Chinese company. But then it's in your control and you're knowledgeable about it. Okay, so again, one of the action plans for today will be listing out your most valuable assets. The second one is that preemption is the best form of protection, meaning that having knowledge up front is the best form of protection. Now, this is actually a case study, again, of a European brand that had, I don't know, around, I'm going to just round it off to say about 100 different suppliers in China producing a variety of different consumer products under their brand, all right? And their thought process was, we are simply producing in China, we're not selling, and as a result, we do not need to register our brand name in China. But you do. Whatever type of business you're doing in a market, whether it's sourcing, whether it's production, whether it's sales, you need to register your trademark, whether it's even service oriented, okay? Now, in this situation, they didn't do that, but they had a supplier who they had a falling out with who did. As a revenge tactic, this supplier registered their mark in China, but not only with the China Trademark Office, but also with the Customs Bureau. And as a result, as suppliers were exporting products, if the brand name was highlighted on either the packaging or on the product itself, it was completely halted because that was a directive of the supplier telling the Customs Bureau to halt anything. It's illegal. It's not coming from us. They had a period of 3 to 4 months where they could not export any item that had their brand name on it. So what they did for those items, those products itself that didn't have the brand name on it, they were able to export those goods via blank packaging. So what you see, blank cartons, what you see here today on the slide, to get the products out. But they had to go through a court case. The whole thing lasted about 3 to 4 months, if not a little bit longer, until they were able to grasp at their brand, get it back, and they were able to prove that it was done in bad faith, but it did halt their business. So what I want to highlight out of this is that, again, understand what are the regulations in regards to everything, and you've got to protect your assets. And not just go back and say, well, I'm not selling, so I'm not marketing my brand. Well, you're still producing products with your brand name on it. You've got to protect it, and you've got to register it, not just with the CTMO office, the China Trademark Office, but also with the customs bureaus. All right. The last case study I want to do is a joint venture. So joint ventures still happen today. I don't normally recommend them. I think there are alternative structures that can be created where both parties have a win-win situation without actually setting up a joint venture structure. But there's still companies that prefer this type of model. And so they set up a joint venture. Now, this is the case of an Australian company who established the joint venture together with a Chinese partner based out of Tianjin. Now, the biggest thing that I want to highlight out of this is that the Australian party never paid attention to the company. Their biggest mistake and their biggest failing with this joint venture, and they lost considerable amounts of money. They just simply did not pay attention. We came into the picture 3 years after the joint venture was established to do a complete health check surrounding the joint venture structure from a legal side and a financial side, as well as a tax side. And we discovered many things. The biggest thing that we discovered was that capital or money was being funneled out of the organization to the joint venture partner's brother through transactions that were literally company to the individual with no supporting documentation. And it was approximately 50,000 RMB per month. So you're talking about, let's say, 5,000–6,000 pounds a month for a period of 3 years. Okay. Then, you find out little things and tidbits that are just affecting the operations. And so let me tell you what I said to the Australian company. I said, as part of we need documents up front before we start the health check. So we said, could you please provide us the audit reports and the financial management accounts for the whole period we were investigating? And they had that in Chinese. And I said, so, do you have the English versions? Let me take a look at them. Then we can compare also that the true translation has been made. They didn't have English versions. They never asked for English versions. Their assumption was that nobody can translate that. Again, sometimes common sense evades people. But, when I told them you could take those financial management reports and go to a translator in Sydney or in Melbourne or wherever to get them translated for less than $100, they were stumped. I mean, they realized how blatantly simple it was. Their focus was always, well, it should be the responsibility of the overseas company, of the Chinese company that does that. I said, well, no, you own this company as well. It's your responsibility to get that information. If you don't get it from them, that's a red flag, and you translate it so you can read them. Okay, it's not a matter of just spending so much time on the pre-investment stage and analyzing everything and then putting pen to paper. You have to continue to pay attention to this organization throughout. And, this is not just China. This is if you were going to set up a subsidiary in Brazil, in India, I don't know, across the border in France or in the US, you would still have to pay attention to that organization. But I don't know whether it's cultural barriers or language barriers or time zone issues. There's always one of these 3 excuses that pops up, which is no longer an excuse. There's always ways of knowing what's going on within your organization. So the whole point of today is to put you guys on this roadmap to avoid all of these obstacles that these previous 4 companies had. And to give you guys the ability to expand into a very exciting new market that does have language and cultural barriers, has time zone issues as well. But the whole point is that I want you guys all to be able to sleep at night knowing that whatever you are doing in China, you have transparency, complete and utter transparency. And you have the ability to, you have the knowledge level and the ability to pivot your organization in any direction you want it to in order to keep up with the current trends that are occurring. Okay, so we want you to be in compliance. I want to be able to provide you with the tools that you can become aware of warning signs or red flags that are occurring, so you have the ability to fix those situations, and ultimately that you can avoid really the most common obstacles that pop up without being, careful within your organization. The 5 biggest problems that I see companies facing, and it's been so pronounced actually over COVID, is the lack of communication with with your China partners or even your China team. It's turning a blind eye on and 3 are combined, but I wanted to separate that. It's basically turning a blind eye and saying, well, that's China, you do things under the table. No, we're almost in 2021. We don't do things under the table anymore. Ethical situations, again, if you have a feeling like, well, I've never done a transaction like this before, it's a bit odd the way they're asking us to do it, well, that's a red flag, okay? That's where you then get help and you say, I'm being asked by a distributor or a supplier to transact like X, Y, and Z. Does this make sense? Is there something I should be watching out for? You don't want to get into a situation where you could get yourself or your company into trouble. The employment of staff, okay? And this is where people don't get salary guidelines, and it gets very frustrating. There are free salary guidelines all over the internet in relation to China. And I always get the impression that people are in a rush to have staff without evaluating their backgrounds, without evaluating their asking price. And in the end, you have unqualified individuals who are extremely expensive. And that's something you've got to avoid. You need to build the right team from the start, okay? And there's so many tools out there to be able to give you that information and data so that you have the ability to hire the right people, all right? And the last big problem that I see is having no data at your fingertips. So basically not doing research and not doing consistent research to be able to pivot one's organization because there's data at your fingertips to make those decisions, all right? So let's start with the superpowers. So we're going to start off with milestone number 1, which is opportunity. It's awareness. It's an understanding of what can the Chinese market offer you. Okay. So superpower number 1 is education. Where can you get your education on China? All right. Because one of my main commandments is knowledge is power. You need to have a knowledge base on doing business in China that you can make decisions quickly and be able to pivot accordingly. Okay, so we all know that everyone's on a tight budget. So where can you get free information from? Now, there's several ways to have continuous education, but the key is making sure that you actually execute that and you're reading things up. So one is from lawyers. You don't have to pay for their newsletters, guys. All right. If you're using a lawyer in the UK and they have an office in China, subscribe to their mailing. Okay, you might not want to read that mailing every week or every month, but you can save it in a folder in your Outlook and just go back to it. All right. Lawyers, all lawyers, offer free articles, free publications, free webinars, free informational sessions, and don't forget the first meeting is always free of charge. Okay, you have a way to obtain information through lawyers without spending a dime. All right, Then you've got corporate service provider. So Woodburn would fall under being corporate service provider. And trust me, there are thousands of us in China, thousands. My tip for corporate service providers is if you are approaching a corporate service provider where there's somebody with a white face, like myself, make sure one of the questions you ask them is, how long have you been in China and how much do you know about China? Because, and trust me, I made this mistake in the past, right? I'm 17 years in China. I physically do a lot of the work that I preach about with my clients. And I used to hire client relationship managers that were foreigners that were newly graduated and that I was basically training on my knowledge level, but they never obtained the knowledge that I had because they were always just listening to me. So when you're talking to corporate service providers and you're talking to someone, make sure you have an understanding of what is their individual background and their experience level in China, because you don't want to work with a corporate service provider that doesn't have that level of knowledge base, okay? So I don't hire foreign relationship managers any longer because I see that as a fault to the business because they aren't able to advise clients the way I can with 17 years of experience. And I would prefer actually to hire locals. Now, why do I want to hire locals? Because who knows the information better than the locals? Who's got a better network than the locals? So, I have a knowledge base that I've built and earned over 17 years. But even if I don't know something, I go to local people who have that network, have that knowledge, and have that expertise to be able to guide me, all right? But keep in mind, corporate service providers, again, articles, webinars, informational sessions, meetings are free of charge. So you can gain data and information from everywhere. Chambers of commerce are a fantastic source of network and information. And you don't even have to join the chamber. You could just go on the mailing list. So if you're from the UK, you can go to the British Chamber of Shanghai, British Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, British Chamber of Commerce in Beijing. I believe there are 3 or 4 or 5 of them in China. You also have in the UK, the China-Britain Business Council. Get on their mailing list. You get all the recent legal updates. Costs nothing to get on a mailing list, okay? It does build up your inbox, but like I said, you don't have to read everything today. Save it into an Outlook folder and go back to it. That's what I do, all right? So that's with the China Chambers of Commerce of China country associations. And then obviously you have the EU SME Center, which is now in phase, well, I don't want to make a mistake here. I think phase 3 or phase 4 now even of European Union government assistance. And on their website, they publish free research reports. Even if they would sell their research reports, you're not spending more than 50 euros. But just keep in mind, these are very broad, superficial research reports. They don't necessarily go into the nitty-gritty. And they're a fantastic source of information. You also, I haven't added it here, but you also have the intellectual property SME Center as well, something with intellectual property based out of the EU that you can also utilize, that's also free of charge. So many sources that are free of charge. And you have Google. The only thing that I would advise you with doing searches by yourself online is make sure you are only reading content that is not older than 12 months. So we are now in December 2020. I do not read anything that is now published in 2019. So unless it's very generic information, but otherwise I don't read it because, like I said in my intro, regulations and laws change very frequently. And so if you are looking and doing your own research, which is great, just don't read anything that is now published in 2019. It will most likely be outdated. Try to find and search for information that was published within 2020. So in your workbooks and your handbooks, I've created a section for you in terms of how are you going to educate yourself. Okay, well, You're on Woodburn Accountants and Advisors mailing list, so that's one source of free information and content. But I'd love for you guys to list another 4 that you will subscribe to by the end of today, because a subscription involves inserting an email address. It can be done in less than 5 minutes. I've given you a bunch of different sources. If you guys are not sure about certain sources that you're looking for, let me know. You may also want to research specific industry-related organizations in China where you could subscribe to their mailing lists. You can even subscribe to your competitors' mailing lists to get updated on what they're doing in China. All right, so list out in your workbook, what will you be doing? It takes 5 minutes to subscribe to get free education, okay? Best is to educate yourself free of charge. The second superpower is research. All right, and there's a variety of research that you can do. What I want to just highlight here today is there is no point in going into the Chinese market if you don't have data at your fingertips, okay? There's a variety of research you can do. I've listed, I think, 7 here, from market segmentation to product testing to pricing to competitor benchmarking to brand awareness. There is so much research you can do. You don't have to do all of this at once. But what I want to highlight is that in order to evaluate whether there is a market for you in China and to what extent that market is, you will only be able to make that decision with data at your fingertips. Okay? Do not under-evaluate what research can provide to you. Okay? It is critical. I myself consistently every 2 years do a benchmarking against my competitors. And what I analyze is how are they doing their advisory? What do they charge for their advisory? How do their service fee structures look like? Are they similar? Have they updated their fees? Have they increased their fees? What do their service agreements look like? There's so many different ways of doing this type of research, okay? But without that competitor benchmarking, I don't know where I am in the market. I don't know if there are things that I could improve, right? And I'm talking about it from a service sector experience. But this is something everybody should be doing, to benchmark where they stand in today's market and where can they make improvements and what should they eliminate. Now, one company took out of this China roadmap was the fact that they hadn't done research. So they actually did product testing. They are a marzipan company, and when they do product testing, the people are evaluating the packaging, and there's a questionnaire for everyone to fill out. Ultimately, the product was fantastic, beautiful. People had nothing to say about that, but the packaging was something that everybody, it was like almost a 90% response to the negative response to the packaging, which was you got to change your packaging for the Chinese market. So they then delved further into analysis. How could they change it? What would they have to change? What would be the cost of that change? Let's have demos and then do another focus group to see what that will create. So many things to think about, right? And I get it. Many of you are not in China. Your feet aren't on the ground. It's hard to do this type of testing, but don't forget that you can outsource. There are plenty of companies that can do all of this variety of research for you. So I think what you need to analyze at this point is what data points do you have now that you use to analyze the opportunity, and what data points will you need to analyze the opportunity? All right, please list that out in your handbook. Give it a whirl. Understand what you have and understand what you still need to get processed. The minute that you know what you still need to get gives you a direction on who to reach out to perform those research items in China. And if you guys need contacts, I have plenty of them. I'm happy to make referrals for you, so you have that ability. okay? Please, I hope you're using your handbooks, and I hope you're using them wisely. Then obviously superpower number 3 is putting pen to paper, okay? It's actually creating a sales strategy, a business plan, and a budget. And this is where people then get stuck and they don't create them at all because it's all in their head, right? But when you're working for a large organization or you're looking to attract investors, this is a key component. You have to put pen to paper, okay? You have to create a game plan, maybe even a phased business plan, right? Within 5 to 10 years. And then obviously, how much money do you need to get in? There's no point going into the Chinese market if you don't have a realization of your financial and your time resources, because you will need both of those in order to be able to get the ball rolling and kicking off in China. All right, so creating this is critical. And again, for those of you that don't know how to put pen to paper, you don't even know where to start. Like I said, I had a guy in his 50s asking me the other day how to write a business plan. You know, for me, it's something that's very basic, but yeah, there are people there who don't know how to do this, okay? So if you do want to create a viable business plan with a viable budget, here are just some of the main chapters that I would recommend you to have in there. And you should start off, right? Listing, drafting, and putting points together. But one of the key things that I want to highlight in regards to the business plans and the budgets is the following. Don't throw your business plan and budget haphazardly together, right? Which many people do, especially if they don't have the data points. Do it right. Have a partner, whether it's someone in your senior management or external, to counter you, to brainstorm with you, to ask the difficult questions to you regarding your business plan and your budget, okay? I always say, you know, opportunities can be absolutely fantastic in China, and then it can lead to tremendous disappointment. So when you are creating your business plans and your budgets, even if your data points seem overwhelmingly fantastic, be conservative, because obstacles will arise for everyone. Everyone has a different journey. I've never seen one company have the same journey as another. And things just pop up that you would have least expected, like COVID, right? So be conservative, have an area of slack and wiggle room. And if you are a company that's already established in China, you know, fiscal years are January to December. So you definitely want to start your budgeting and your business planning for the following year in October, or at least getting drafts together so that by December 31st, it's ready to go. It's been approved. And then ultimately, monitor, evaluate, and reforecast. And this involves having a team that actually analyzes this, okay? So that's part of milestone number 3, but it's something that I'm already putting in milestone number 1 under opportunity, that you've got to continuously monitor, evaluate, and reforecast. All right, so for those of you that are having difficulty putting pen to paper, you know, one of the key things I put in the handbook was what chapters have been completed. So what do you know? What have you put pen to paper on? What budget line items are done as well? And where do you still need help? And obviously the biggest question is, whom can I collaborate with on this? There are a variety of people you can speak to regarding putting pen to paper and analyzing the strategy and the development. Many people that are providing research also help with the development of channel strategies and organization structures and whatnot. So definitely, you know, put that pen to paper. So milestone number 1, have you been able to evaluate the opportunity for China? If the answer is yes, then you move on to milestone number 2, which is all about implementation. And the first step regarding implementation is how, you know, the biggest question that I get asked is, how do I begin? Where do I begin? Okay. The first step for me, and I just hope I'm making you all realize that with each of these superpowers, it's not that you achieve it and then you forget about it. These superpowers are things that you have to consistently maintain. So even with the ecosystem, this is something you will develop as soon as you get your education, because for those of you that are on here now getting an education, I am part of your ecosystem now. I am a support to help you develop and grow your business. The lawyers, the chambers of commerce, they're all going to be part of your ecosystem. These are individuals that you're putting in there that can help you grow and develop your business. It's your entire network for China. Okay, so where are you going to meet these people? Well, as you can tell, I created this presentation a long time ago before COVID. And the first one was trade shows, which obviously don't exist anymore, but eventually will come back. And obviously you still have these virtual trade shows, and you also have websites like Alibaba where you can make connections. Making connections in the trade sector is vital, okay? And what I want people to realize is that business cards are becoming obsolete, and WeChat is becoming the main point of business contact and communication. If you don't have WeChat, this is definitely a tool that will be invaluable for your business. You must have it, okay? And it will be a way for you to maintain relationships and start conversations. LinkedIn currently is probably the most fantastic source of meeting China-related individuals. LinkedIn is not blocked in China. There's full access to it. And the Chinese are getting more and more familiar with putting their profiles up there. So even finding employees, fantastic way is through LinkedIn. Then you've also got the chambers of commerce, right? Where you can get their mailing lists and you can meet all these people that are presenting or publishing things, and you add them to your network, to your ecosystem. You start having conversations with them, okay? And then ultimately networking events, which, you know, without COVID would be something I would highly recommend. With COVID, it's a bit difficult. But again, if you can join networking events online, like Zoom presentations, these webinars, you know, it's a fantastic way to meet people. Just to add into this ecosystem, at Woodburn, we've developed through WeChat a China roadmap community, a way for people. I have no service providers in there. It is purely end clients, end companies who are establishing their business in China, transacting with China, looking to set up in China. And it's a way for people to simply share their experiences. Today, I posted, because the British Chamber of Commerce came out with a confidence survey on China, I actually posted what are people's confidence levels? What are the challenges that people see in 2021? How is generally the political situation with China, US, China, UK affecting people? It is a great way for people to just communicate with one another, okay? And just network and meet through WeChat, okay? So ecosystem is vital. So as part of the handbook, I've listed who can help me today, that's in my list, that's in my network, and who do I need to meet, i.e., what people do I need to know from sectors or industries do I need to meet in order to be able to push my project forward, okay? So it's really good to analyze who you know, contacting those people to see how they can help you, and maybe they can refer you to other people that can expand your network. Okay, it goes like that. It's very simple. And trust me, people in China love to introduce to other people for no charge. All right, so keep that in mind. Superpower number 5 is all about protection, because as we know, fraud exists not only in China, it exists all over the world, okay? And obviously you are not right now on the ground in China. So it is very common, and I've done this myself, where you misplace a lot of trust and loyalty in employees and suppliers and customers. And I say this having even been on the ground. But again, my knowledge level when I first arrived was peanuts. I assumed I knew a lot. I didn't. I knew nothing. And where was I going to get that education? It was going to be from employees, suppliers, and customers. So I relied on them heavily. And I made a lot of mistakes by doing that, okay? Because trust should be earned. It should not be given from day one because you know nothing. Loyalty should be earned, okay? It takes time to build that, years, in fact. So the fact that you don't have your feet on the ground and the fact that you're reliant on people just means it is so much more important that you protect all of the assets that are most important to you. okay? Because everybody has obstacles that pop up. Now, you have to make a list. You have to analyze what do you need to protect. Obviously, intellectual property, everything from trademarks, domain registrations, marketing materials, copyright, patents is vital, okay? Ownership to marketing tools is vital. Having corporate governance, again, whether you're established in China or not, related to your China business. Due diligence procedures, how are you vetting people? When you employ someone, are you going to do a background check? Have you thought of that? Are you reliant on your headhunter to do that for you, or do you want to do that yourself? How, if you do establish an entity in China, how are the company chops going to be used? That is an extremely vital asset. Where are your business licenses going to be kept? Because you're not on the ground. How are you going to develop system processes so that you know no kickbacks can be made? You have, again, crossed the T's and dotted the I's on your whole supply chain. Nobody can get away with anything. How are you going to manage your inventory and warehousing systems? I mean, this is just a really short list, right? But when you have evaluated your assets and what is critical to you, what you need to protect, right? Then you have to actually implement those things. There's no point creating a list of assets and then not doing anything with it. You've got to actually create a system process to protect them, all right? Whether that's creating internal operational guidelines, management directives, doing frequent health checks, internal audits, appointing the right directors and senior management personnel, and then just having on your speed dials your China experts, those folks that are in your ecosystem that can help you, right? And then executing all of these guidelines and directives, getting those trademarks registered, getting your domain registered. All of those things are critical, okay? And remember, preemption by action is your best and least form of protection. So what I've done, and you've got this slide in your handbook, I've created a very short list of assets that I think are critical. Trademark search and registration, domain registration, website development for China. Who owns all of that, right? Marketing material for China. Who's owning it? Product registrations. Who's the agent that's listed on those product registrations or toxicology reports or any of those types of licenses? Or labeling for food and beverage. Due diligence on partners. Are you going to do it? Are you not going to do it? If you do it, what method are you going to use that gives you the best information and knowledge level on those partners? Having operational guidelines, management directives, okay? Understanding your business scope, the capital investment, the term of validity of your operation and your phased operation, shareholdership, corporate management, bank operation. Who's going to operate your bank accounts? Who's going to have access to the bank accounts? Registered office address, financial guidelines, pricing guidelines, haven't even added that here, price guidelines, contract guidelines with partners, HR guidelines. Who is in charge of what, right? Who's responsible for what? And can I just highlight here, most companies that enter place no focus on this. I am currently speaking to 2 companies that are looking to establish their businesses in China, and they still do not have the proper concepts around capital investment, corporate management, because they just simply haven't educated themselves on it. And they're in such a rush to get these projects up and running that I see mistakes happening. I'm trying to tell them as much as I can, but they're in such a rush, they're not looking back on it. And I've blatantly, because I am brash like this, said to them, you will have to pay more later to fix things than doing it right now and just taking your time. But they're in a rush. And so they don't focus on this checklist, which just basically means at the point where the operation in China is set up, people are employed, they're going to be spending more time in the first 2 years on fixing administrative functions and spending money on it than focusing on the growth of their business. And this is why companies aren't expanding at a faster rate in China, because their first 2 years are usually spent on fixing things and not paying attention to them. So what I want you to do in your handbook is, again, many of these things might not apply to you, but if they do apply to you, create that asset checklist and cross it off when things are done. Make sure it's on your to-do list. So at this point, it's, have you been able to implement your strategy successfully? Is all the back-end operations set up, system processes executed, and you've got people on your speed dial that are there to help you at a moment's notice? All right. If so, then we can focus on stage 3 or milestone number 3, which is growth. Superpower number 7 is numbers. Do you have a sound accounting system? Do you have an ERP system in China? Are you going to invest in that? Is that an asset? Who's going to have access to it? Right? Do you have the ability to look, read, and understand the Chinese figures? And it's not just from a, like, can you read the financial management report and it's in English? It's also, do you have an understanding of the PRC GAAP system, that you understand the whole system related to VAT, that you have an operational guideline on VAT FAPIAOs? Do you have an understanding on profits tax? Do you have an understanding on profit repatriation strategies, and are those being implemented? Do you have a financial controlling system in place so that someone is analyzing your budget against the actual figures? Are you sitting down analyzing and discussing with your finance team, right? These are all things that are vital, because the next 2 superpowers are all about analysis and focus. Are you analyzing the data, right? So when I say data at this point, I'm talking about financial data, i.e., because you're transacting in China, but also your research data, because that's something that should be consistent and continuous, together with just generally sales data. What are your clients thinking about, right? All the way to sourcing data, i.e. your cost of goods or your cost of services, all the way down to, are you spending too much money on marketing, on PR? You've got to analyze all aspects of your business. First way of doing that is through your financial management report system. Then you got to look at your data, research points, and other things. All right. So analysis is key. It's critical, and it will help you to focus then on your strategy. It will help you to pivot at any point you have to pivot. It will help you to retract slightly if you have to retract. It will help you to push forward 3 steps if you have to push forward 3 steps and you have the ability to do so. China is a fast-paced country, and decisions have to be made quickly. If you can't read your financial management reports and you don't consistently have data points for research on your fingertips, you can't move forward. It's very difficult. Okay? Analysis is key. So at this point, the big question everybody should be asking themselves is, are you focusing on your strategy and growth plan, or are you still at milestone number 2 where you're implementing the back end and fixing issues? Many times obstacles will arrive in milestone 3 when you're looking to grow. It's like a rock has fallen down a hill and completely blocked your path. And most of the time it's because assets haven't been protected. Like IP, trademark, hasn't been thought about. It could be that you don't have a VAT operational guideline and you're doing the wrong type of invoicing. So many different things that can pop up. Okay, so you've got to be aware of all of these tools that are available and all of these action plans that you have to do really in the early stages of your development in order to make sure that your focus is really on the core. I want your focus to be on the core activities, okay, on what will bring you your business. But if you don't have the back end set up properly, you can't do that. So I would love to know, what were your takeaways from today? That was the end of today's presentation, by the way. But I would love to know what your takeaways were from today. Just give me your top number 1 takeaway. in the handbook, I've actually put in a slide of what will be your immediate action plan in the next 2 weeks. What do you think you'll get up and running? I'd love to hear about that if you would like to share it with me. But for today, do let me know. What was your #1 takeaway? This helps me a lot in understanding whether the presentation was good for you, whether you got something out of it. But do let me know. Type that into the questions section of the control panel. How Woodburn can help is basically everything from network introduction to a variety of different sources. So from banks to real estate agents to chambers of commerce to whomever you might need. We also offer the education and advisory. We can also help to sit down with you to create your business plans and budgets and help you validate those. We offer supervisory services, which is part of the corporate management in China, trademark registration, incorporation, and then all of the services related to implementation and growth, from operational guidelines, management directives, accounting, tax, payroll, analysis, financial controlling, etc. All right. If you guys are interested in connecting with me or having a 15-minute chat about the China roadmap, your China roadmap, let me know. I'm just going to put the link now into the chat section of the control panel, and you can set up a meeting directly in my diary. Makes it a little bit easier. If you've got WeChat, you can connect to me through my ID, which I've also put here, or you can connect via email or on LinkedIn. So on LinkedIn, you can find me by the following name. Alrighty, and we're going to start the Q&A. So if people have questions, there is Alan who's had a question, but if anybody else has questions, please do type them in. Alan's question was, I'm signing a licensing deal with a very large US brand to make consumer electronics under their brand. Should I register my brand and the licensors if the latter has not done so already? So Alan, you should be registering your brand, #1 priority. If you have your own brand, do so. In terms of the brand in the US, if you're working ethically, you should be asking them whether they've registered their brand in China or not. If not, you should ask them that it be registered. Otherwise, there's no point for you to get into this business. And the big question then you should ask them is whether you should own it or whether they should own it. You know, if it was me and I'm neutral in this discussion, really this US brand should be owning it and sub-licensing it to you, because then you have the licensing agreement, right? If you want to be unethical, then you would register it and tell them that you own it in China, right? But yeah, definitely your brand, register it, #1 priority. And then in terms of the US brand, it's up to them. It's a strategy decision that they have to make. I hope I answered your question, Alan. If you've got any further questions, let me know. Nobody else has asked questions or typed in, and we are running out of time. So I will move on. Again, if you guys want to jump on a call with me, happy to do so. Alan, if you want information, by the way, about how to register a trademark in China, drop me an email and I can send you those details about how to get that done. WeChat community, our China roadmap community, if you're interested in joining that, please do let me know. And then just to finish off, we have a bunch of lovely webinar series starting in 2021. And the biggest one is your branding, because this has been highly asked for. We're going to be starting off January with your branding strategy for China. It will be from Jan 25th to 29th. We'll have 5 webinar sessions in a week. Everything with, actually a client of mine will be coming on because he's actually a storyteller and brand developer himself. And I'll have 2 other companies, digital marketing experts coming on also. Stay tuned for that. They're not set up yet, but as soon as I have those details, which should be by the end of next week, those will be going up live, and I'll be sending out an e-campaign on those. February, we'll be doing one on market entry strategy. And in March, all about setting up a company in China. So do stay tuned for those as they're being created and set up. No other questions have popped in. So I'm going to end today's session there. If you guys want to type anything else, let me know. I do want to thank you for joining me. And as I end today's session, I would like to wish you all a fantastic end to 2020. I say fantastic even during COVID times, but I have to be positive myself. So have a great end to 2020. I hope it is a much start to 2021. Merry Christmas, happy New Year. And I hope to see you again for our sessions in January. Take care and bye.